The room was silent when Senator John Kennedy leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the mahogany desk. His drawl was steady, his tone razor-sharp, and his eyes fixed directly on Senator Amy Klobuchar. Everyone in the chamber knew what was about to happen. The Louisiana senator had reached his boiling point. And when John Kennedy reached that point, no one walked away unchanged. The hearing had begun like any other, with formalities and rehearsed statements. Klobuchar, confident and polished, had taken the microphone and launched onto what sounded like a carefully scripted speech about bipartisanship and accountability. But beneath the polished words, Kennedy heard something else: evasions, half-truths, and politics disguised as principle. He could tolerate many things, but dishonesty, in his view, was poison to democracy. He leaned back at first, watching her speak, watching the staffers nod, watching the cameras capture every second. But as her words turned into accusations against others while sidestepping her own accountability, Kennedy's face hardened. His jaw clenched, and for a brief moment, you could almost hear the Louisiana fire building inside him. Then, he pressed the microphone button. "Senator Klobuchar," he began, his voice carrying the weight of thunder even though he barely raised it, "I've listened to you, and I'll tell you this straight, what you just said may sound good on paper, but it doesn't sound one lick honest." The room froze. Klobuchar blinked, taken aback. She shifted in her chair, trying to recover. But Kennedy wasn't finished. He launched into a tirade that was as raw as it was eloquent. He spoke of forgotten Americans, of the factory workers who had lost jobs while politicians played word games in Washington. He spoke of small business owners strangled by regulations written by people who never ran a lemonade stand. He spoke of veterans who came home only to be met with bureaucracy instead of honor. "You sit there and you talk about working for the people," Kennedy said, his hand slapping the desk for emphasis, "but I've sat across from too many of them, and I've seen the tears in their eyes. They don't feel represented by the sound bites and the slogans. They want honesty, they want courage, and most of all they want someone who won't look the other way when it gets inconvenient." Amy Klobuchar remained silent, her lips pressed together, her fingers nervously gripping the armrest of her chair. The cameras caught every flicker of her expression. This wasn't just politics anymore, this was a reckoning. Kennedy's words turned more personal, yet somehow universal. He talked about his father, a small-town lawyer who always said a man's word was his most valuable currency. He told the story of a neighbor in Louisiana who had lost everything in a flood, only to rebuild from the ground up without asking the government for a dime. "That's America," Kennedy said, his voice breaking for the first time. "That's who we're supposed to fight for, and not ourselves, not our careers, but them." The longer he spoke, the more the energy in the room shifted. The staffers who had been smirking earlier were now stone-faced. Even reporters who had come expecting a routine exchange were scribbling furiously, knowing history was being written right in front of them. By the time Kennedy was done, the rant had lasted nearly 20 minutes. Not a single interruption, not a single attempt to cut him off. The entire chamber had been spellbound, forced to sit with his words. And Amy Klobuchar, once so commanding, could only sit there and take it, her silence louder than any rebuttal. When Kennedy finally leaned back, he didn't gloat, he didn't smile or nod in self-satisfaction. He simply said, "The American people are tired of speeches. They want truth, and I'll keep saying it until someone listens." The hearing ended, but the moment did not. Clips of Kennedy's fiery rant spread across the country within hours. People who had never tuned into a Senate hearing found themselves watching the Louisiana senator speak with the passion that reminded them of the grit and honesty their grandparents once revered. And though politics would continue, as it always does, something about that day lingered. It wasn't just about Kennedy versus Klobuchar. It was about truth versus spin. It was about one man's refusal to stay silent when silence would have been easier. For those watching, the message was clear: honesty may not always be convenient, it may not always win applause in the room, but it will always echo in the hearts of those who long for leaders who serve, not self-serve. And that day, Kennedy proved that sometimes the most powerful speeches aren't scripted, but born from conviction, fire, and an unshakable love for the people you swore to represent.